Hello, and welcome to the Permission to Breathe podcast, a transformative space dedicated to providing a sanctuary where you can inhale deeply and exhale freely, embracing your grief journey unapologetically. I am your host, Dr. Tammy Isaac, here with you every Monday to offer comfort, guidance, and hope. Together we'll navigate this path, finding moments to pause, reflect, and breathe. Let's begin this journey side by side. Today's episode is brought to you by Collateral Beauty, a Black woman's metamorphosis of grief, self-love, and healing by Dr. Tammy Isaac. For generations, Black women have carried invisible burdens, grieving in silence under the weight of societal expectations and trauma. Now it's time to embrace healing, self-love, and the beauty that remains. In Collateral Beauty, Dr. Tammy Isaac invites you on a powerful journey through grief, faith, and renewal. This book will guide you to process grief and trauma with intention, discover self-love and inner strength, build deeper connections through sisterhood and faith, and embrace vulnerability, forgiveness, and gratitude as tools for growth. Take the first step toward embracing your beauty, your story, and your healing journey. Don't wait. Grab a copy today on Amazon. Welcome to the Permission to Breathe podcast, where we embrace life's toughest moments with grace, wisdom, and the courage to keep moving forward. I'm your host, Dr. Tammy Isaac, and I am especially honored to bring you this episode during Women's History Month, a time to celebrate the strength, resilience, and contributions of women throughout history and in our daily lives. This month, as we reflect on the power of women to overcome challenges and create change, it's important to acknowledge one of the most profound experiences many of us face, which is grief. As women, we are often the caretakers, the nurturers, and the ones holding everything together, even while navigating our own deep personal loss. But grief doesn't have to stop our growth. It can become part of our transformation. So in today's episode, we'll explore how to bloom through grief, answering some of the most pressing questions women have about balancing grief with personal empowerment. These questions are actually questions that I had the opportunity to answer on a panel at a women's conference. And the questions that we answered are, how do we find joy again after loss? How do we honor our emotions while managing work, family, and responsibilities? And most importantly, how can we continue to thrive while carrying the memories of those we've lost? In this conversation, I want you to know it is for every woman who is learning to hold both grief and growth in the same breath. So as we begin this conversation, let's start by taking a deep breath. And let's journey together through healing and empowerment. And I want you to know that you're not alone. Let's get started. Let's begin with a question that so many women, including myself, have wrestled with. So the first question is, how can I find joy after experiencing a deep loss? This is a question that doesn't have a one-size-fit-all answer, but research and lived experience do offer us some helpful direction. The truth is, joy doesn't return all at once. It often shows up in small, quiet ways. Sometimes we don't even realize it has arrived until we look back and see that moment that we laughed and smiled and maybe felt a sense of peace. What I've learned is that I don't really always have to make moments of joy by being intentional, but there are times where joy shows up just in my daily routine of living life and being a part of the world. Now, according to research in positive psychology, rediscovering joy begins with intentionality, because there are sometimes that we have to be intentional about things. It starts with allowing ourselves to feel the full weight of our grief, while also being open to noticing the light that slowly returns, whether that's through connecting with loved ones, embracing nature, or just simply finding comfort in your daily routines. But it slowly shows up, and we should not have the expectation that joy will just come flooding back automatically. Sometimes it takes a process, uh, and it is not one size fit all, right? It is based on the depth of the love and the loss that you've experienced. It also is based on what your daily routine looks like, how you are connecting with the world and the people around you. Also has to be taken into context of how joy is filtering through your life. And some of that is me being intentional about how I am engaging in daily life. And then sometimes joy just flows through, maybe not through ourselves, but it comes through the interaction that I'm having with the world and the people around me, that it flows over into my life. And so in those moments, I need to be intentional about being open to receive the joy that is flowing my way. Now, gratitude is another powerful tool. Studies have shown that women who intentionally practice gratitude during grief report a greater sense of emotional well-being. Now, that might look like keeping a journal of small things that you're thankful for each day, even if it's just being able to get out of bed or grabbing a sip of water or a sip of tea. These small acknowledgments retain the brain, retrain the brain to recognize goodness in the midst of your pain. So one of the things that I definitely had to do as I went through my grief journey and was in therapy, I learned that even though I was saying that I was grateful and thankful for all of the things that God had blessed me with, there was a part of me that was not grateful, and I needed to be intentional about expressing my gratitude in that season of my life. And so one of the things that helped me very much was actually keeping a journal. And I would write, I kind of just made a stipulation of things that I wanted to include in that daily journal. And every day I would write down 10 things that I was thankful for. I would write down names of at least 3 people that I wanted to send love to and compassion toward. And then I would write a scripture that was based on Thanksgiving. And I would do that every day. And then also on top of that, I was being very intentional. I purchased a gratitude. I can't remember what the name of it is, but there's a gratitude book. It's like it's the 5-minute gratitude book actually. And it had like maybe 4 questions that you kind of like fill in the blank that was related to you being grateful throughout your day. And so I did that every morning. I still have that journal. I don't do it as often, but in the beginning, I was doing it at least for a year, every single day, being intentional to make sure that I was filling that out, because I wanted to be clear in my conscious and my subconscious that I was very much grateful for the life that I had, even though I was still grieving the loss of my mom. And let's be clear, I do want to say finding joy doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean replacing what you've lost. It literally just means allowing yourself to live again. It means realizing that joy and grief can coexist, and that's okay. Um, to happen. It's okay to smile through tears, to dance in their memories, and to laugh, even when your heart is aching. I used to be puzzled at like why families would be together and somebody passed away, and then all of a sudden they're laughing and telling jokes. And I realized that that was a moment of honoring and holding space and remembering the loved one who passed. And it's a very healthy thing to be doing at that time, even though it looks contradictory of somebody's dying and then we're laughing. But through the memories that we share of the person that we've lost, it allows us to be able to cope with the grief that we're experiencing at that moment, and not just by ourselves, but also within community, which brings another layer of support. And also we're remembering that we can hold space for both joy and also pain at the same time, or suffering at the same time. So if you're wondering how to find joy again, I want you to know this, that it really starts with permission to feel what you feel, permission to embrace the present moment, and permission to believe that joy is still a part of your story, even after your loss. This is the essence of blooming through grief, growing in a new direction, rooted in the memory of what once was, and hopefully for what still can be as you move forward. Now let's move to another powerful question. The question is, what are some healthy ways to cope with the initial shock of grief while continuing to grow personally? Um, so grief can hit us like a tidal wave. I often refer to it as being like waves in the ocean. They're sudden, disorienting, and can be very paralyzing when you're not expecting it, right? So especially in the beginning, when everything feels raw and fresh and new, the idea of growing may feel very much out of reach. And that's okay, because growth doesn't mean skipping past your pain. It means giving yourself space to feel it without letting it consume you, consume your identity. Research shows that in the early days of grief, stabilization is the first step that we need to take. So we talk about using grounding techniques. These are just simple practices that bring you back into the present moment when your emotions feel way too big, right? When it feels like a tidal wave gushing over you, making you feel disoriented or even paralyzed to be able to move forward. Something as simple as placing your feet on the floor, focusing on your breath, or naming 5 things that you can see around you can really help your nervous system settle. So one of the biggest things that I often use is breathing, of course. And so taking moments to breathe through the experience and the emotions that you're feeling. On top of that, you can also add to that by, naming the things that you see in front of you, putting your feet flat on the floor, and just focusing in on the present moment and what you see. Another tool backed by research is the cognitive behavioral therapy, or they call it CBT. While you don't need to be in a formal therapy setting to use its principles, CBT teaches us to gently challenge thoughts that spiral us into fear, guilt, or even shame. So, for example, if your mind says, I should be stronger, or I shouldn't still be crying, what you want to do is pause and just reframe the thought and tell yourself things like, grief has no timeline, or I'm allowed to feel and I'm allowed to heal at my own pace. And for women, especially, we must make space to grieve authentically, not just the way the world expects us to. Sometimes that means turning off the autopilot and asking for help and saying no to responsibilities that don't even serve your healing. Growth during grief might look like choosing to rest over hustle. It might look like journaling, praying, or simply breathing with intention. You don't have to have it all figured out to be growing, right? Every day, every tear you release and every breath that you take, every moment you give yourself grace is growth, right? So if you're in the initial shock right now, let me just remind you, you're not broken, you're human. And even in the midst of the pain, you are planting seeds of healing and transformation. Let's talk about something that often goes unspoken, but is felt by many women navigating loss. The question is, how can grief manifest differently for women balancing multiple roles like mother, wife, and professional? Whew. This one hits home, I believe, with a lot of women, doesn't it? As women, we often wear so many hats: caregiver, nurturer, provider, leader, friend. And when grief enters the room, we don't always get the luxury of falling apart. Like life just keeps moving for us, and so do the responsibilities. Now, research has shown that women tend to internalize grief more than men, especially when they feel pressure to be strong for others. And this can lead to what's called delayed grief, where emotions are pushed down and they end up resurfacing later, often more intensely when they do resurface. We might find ourselves snapping at loved ones, feeling exhausted for no reason, or becoming emotionally numb, not because we don't care, but because we haven't had space to process. You know, in family systems, especially in cultural and faith communities, women are often expected to hold it down, right? To comfort others while ignoring their own pain. And this is unhealthy, guys. And in professional spaces, grief isn't always welcome. We may return to work too soon, push ourselves to perform, and then feel guilty when our productivity drops. And here's the truth. You don't have to compartmentalize your pain to be effective. And I think this is where a lot of us have fallen short. Grief will show up whether you acknowledge it or not. So it's better to just invite it in with gentleness rather than to pretend that it's not there, right? So you can't just push it aside and say, stay in this closet, stay in this corner. You can't come in. Like, it's going to show up regardless, right? We mentioned that it's like waves. It's like the ocean. It will come suddenly and bring disorientation and sometimes paralyze us. And if we don't want those things to happen and interrupt our life and our daily responsibilities, one of the most important things that we need to do is allow it to be invited, to gently invite it into our lives, into our spaces, and make room for it rather than pretending that it's not there. Now, this can look like maybe taking intentional breaks during your work day to like breathe, or, you know, maybe step outside. Sometimes we're so engrossed in our work trying to get things done that we never get up from our desk. We never walk outside. We don't stop to maybe visit the cafeteria. Some of us wait to the last minute to even go use the restroom, right? Which is crazy. So we have got to learn how important it is to take breaks throughout our day so that we can gather ourselves, gather our thoughts. And what you'll learn is that sometimes just walking away from a thing and putting yourself in a different environment where there is calmness, stillness, and some peace, how it helps you to return back to the work or the responsibility of the things that you're taking care of. Creating sacred time at home to honor your emotions, maybe through journaling, through prayer, or simply saying out loud, I'm not okay today, and that's okay, right? or even communicating with your loved ones and your team members or your support team about what you need and about what you're experiencing at that time. And doing that without guilt, doing that without feeling guilty that you are requesting help or that you are feeling a certain way. We're just going to honor and feel what we feel and share that with somebody else who is a safe space for us to help us carry what we're carrying in that moment. And let me just say this as well. Asking for help does not make you weak. I have to repeat that. It makes you wise. You're not weak. It makes you wise to acknowledge that there is some support that needs here. We don't look at the structure of a home and be like, you're weak and you're no good, and we just get rid of the home. No, we go find roofers. We go find people who can do structural work, and we ask them to fix that without guilt or shame that our house needs some kind of help so that we can continue to live in that place. So if I want to continue to live within myself and who I am, it is okay to ask for help, because this is something wise so that I can remain to live out the days that have been numbered to me in a healthy state, rather than breaking down and never asking for help. Okay. Let your village show up for you the way you show up for everybody else. I had a patient today who mentioned how she is always the one who takes care of everybody else. She's kind of like the caregiver of the family, and she's taking care of all these members of her family. And now she's here in the hospital and she's sick, and now she needs that support. So she doesn't even know what that looks like or how that is going to feel. But she was just overwhelmed with emotions that, you know, that she's the sick one. And, but her family, it was amazing. They found out that she was here, and her mom, her brothers, her friends, neighbors, all those people showed up for her. And she was so overwhelmed with joy. And she said it was the first night since she had been here, 3 nights, that she actually was able to sleep and get good rest and wake up feeling good. And she felt joy in her heart, because at that time she was weak, but having the support of her village is what helped her to be able to keep moving forward. Right. So to the women who out here holding it all together while your heart is breaking, your tears are not a burden. They are sacred. Right? Your grief is not in the way of your purpose. It's a part of it. And in honoring your pain, you give yourself permission to heal and to continue to bloom in every area of your life. Are you grieving and feel like you're struggling alone? You don't have to walk this path by yourself. Book a virtual session with Dr. Tammy Isaac at Breathe Grief Counseling Center. Visit us online at www.breathegriefcounselingcenter.com. Dr. Isaac will help you put your emotions into words. She'll help you reduce the feeling of isolation. She'll help you understand that everyone grieves differently, and also help you prevent unhealthy coping mechanisms. Take control of your life with world-class counseling sessions today with Dr. Tammy Isaac. This next question speaks to the strength and the struggle of so many women. The question is, what advice do you have for women juggling grief while still maintaining their responsibilities and focusing on personal empowerment? Okay, well, if that's not the heart of a woman, I don't know what is. We are often expected to be everything to everyone, show up for our families, meet deadlines and work, care for our communities, and still find time to heal. And that's a lot. Okay. And if no one has told you this lately, let me say it now. You're doing more than enough. Okay. Grief doesn't pause life, but life doesn't erase grief either. Okay. I'm going to say that again. Grief doesn't pause life, but life doesn't erase grief either. Now, according to research on post-traumatic growth, women who navigate loss and still choose to lean into their healing often develop a deeper sense of purpose and inner strength. But that kind of growth doesn't happen by accident. It's intentional. Okay. So what does it look like to juggle grief while still stepping into your power? Well, let me offer just a few research backed and soul grounding truths. Okay. The first one is integrate grief into your daily rhythm. This is not something new. I'm always saying something of this sort. So you don't wait for a perfect moment to feel your feelings. Grieve as you go, actually, right? Take 5 minutes in the morning to journal your emotions, maybe say a prayer. You know, you can light a candle, cry in the car if you need to. Grief doesn't need a stage. It just needs space. It doesn't need a stage. It just needs space. It don't need any well thought out setting or anything. It just needs time and a space to allow its course to flow. Second, redefine productivity. Some days empowerment looks like writing a business plan, and other days it's just brushing your teeth and answering an email. One at that. So you have to realize that both are very much valid, and you got to give yourself grace to be able to recalibrate what success looks like while you're healing. So success for somebody who is healing through maybe, let's say, through surgery of some type of physical wound. We don't expect them to be successful at returning back to everyday life immediately, right? There are times that you're in a hospital and you can't just leave right from the hospital to go home, but then you have to go to some type of rehab, some type of skilled nursing place so that you can get some additional therapy so that you can eventually go back home to begin to live life back the way that you did before. But this takes some time. And so it's important for us to know that even though grief can be an invisible wound that we are experiencing, just because you don't see it doesn't mean that I don't need the time to heal. And I think sometimes because grief is not necessarily this physical wound, that we don't give ourselves grace. Others don't give us grace. And we feel like we should be running the races at the same pace that we were before we experienced this sorrow within our hearts. The third thing is you want to make sure that you build a tribe. So studies have shown that women with strong emotional support systems tend to recover more steadily from grief, or I don't want to say from grief, but they tend to recover and move forward in their grief, right? That doesn't mean that you need a crowd, right? Or it just means that you need just a few trusted people who you consider to be safe spaces that you are able to be vulnerable with, who let you be fully who you are and allow you to be authentic and unfiltered, undone, and in your process, right? And yes, that does include therapy, maybe some spiritual guidance, having, a sister, a homegirl, just whoever that you can sometimes just sit with you in silence, sometimes can just comfort you. Nothing big or major, but if you don't have that in just your everyday community, then you can definitely find yourself a therapist or a counselor that you can be able to share things with. But it does help your process of grief move more steadily, and it makes it more, I don't want to say easy, but it does give you a lot of support to continue to carry the weight, right? For some reason in my mind, the first thing I just thought about is when Jesus is carrying the cross. He still had to carry the cross, right? But there was someone there to help him that took, um, that had compassion for the struggle that he saw Jesus going through, right? So we want people in our lives that can notice the struggle that we're going through and be able to help us carry that weight. We're not giving them the weight because that doesn't work, right? But they can share in the weight with us. So you definitely want to make sure that you can build a tribe. If you don't have that before the grief, it's okay, but you can find people that can help um, be a part of that tribe. And sometimes that could be finding group support, right? There are grief support groups. And I know a lot of people don't really care for group therapy, but there are people who really benefit from that. And those people who don't have support systems or family that they can turn to, group therapy is a great place, because then you're in a place where everyone is experiencing some type of grief and sorrow and can have a bit of understanding of where you are, and allow you to be authentically you, allow you to be undone, unfiltered in your process, and not judge you where you are. And then here's the last thing. Finally, embrace your authority. So what do I mean? Like, you are the expert on your grief. Okay. You don't owe anyone an explanation of how long you're taking or how you're choosing to heal. Because empowerment is reclaiming your time, your energy, and your voice, even when it trembles, right? Because though many of us are experiencing grief and have different emotions that are flowing through us, I simply can't tell you exactly what you're feeling. Only you can express to me what you're feeling in your grief based on your relationship with the one that you've lost, or the experience that you had that has brought you sorrow. And so because you are the expert on your grief, in order for you to move in empowerment, is you reclaiming your voice and your time, your energy to share with people what you're going through and what you're experiencing. And if your healing takes longer, or it looks different, that's because this is your grief and not theirs. Here's the beautiful thing about women. We can hold sorrow in one hand and strength in the other. We can honor our tears and still chase our dreams. We can feel empty and still choose to rise. So if you're balancing right now a million things while carrying this invisible pain, I want you to know that you're not behind. You're not behind your success. You are becoming. And even now, even here, your healing is unfolding in sacred, powerful ways, right? So it just looks different in this season because of what you're experiencing, but you're not behind. As you allow your healing to take place, you are becoming, and you are growing in different ways than you intentionally expected to, because you've had this change in your course, but still yet moving forward toward what you look forward to in your life. Here's our last question for today. How can we honor the memory of a loved one while continuing to bloom and thrive in life? This is where grief becomes sacred, because grief at its core is love with nowhere to go, and honoring someone we've lost while choosing to keep living is one of the most courageous and beautiful things I think that we could ever do. Researchers in grief psychology often refer to this as meaning making, the process of finding purpose and significance in our loss. And let me tell you, this is where many women begin to truly bloom, not in spite of the grief,
but through it. One powerful way to honor a loved one is through legacy building. That might mean continuing a tradition they love, donating to a cause that mattered to them, or even speaking their name aloud in moments of celebration and stillness. Their story doesn't end with their absence, but it continues in you. And you are living proof of their love. Another meaningful approach is engaging in a creative expression. So, writing, painting, creating, or sharing stories. One of the things that I do is writing. So, often, most of what I'm writing has some type of foundation in my love and relationship for my mother that has passed. Research shows that creative outlets allow us to process our grief in ways that words alone sometimes can't. And every time we create in their honor, we are giving our pain purpose. You can also find strength in rituals of remembrance. So this doesn't have to be complicated. So lighting a candle on their birthday, visiting a favorite place of theirs, cooking their favorite meal. These moments become sacred pauses, opportunities for us to say, you are still a part of me. And I've mentioned this a couple of times that, I do certain things that will remind me of my mom, like when I cooked her sweet potato pie, when I celebrated one of my book launches with fried chicken, because toward the end of her life, that was something that she always wanted. I mentioned before that my oldest sister will sometimes go to Jason's Deli and have a sandwich called Amy O, because that was my mom's favorite sandwich. So just doing certain things in her honor. Last year, one of the things that I did was made popcorn balls. So those who grew up with me in high school know that my mom made the best. Okay. And this is not me being biased, but people will tell you to this day that my mom made the best popcorn balls. And my mom would send me to school with a bag full of them, and I would sell them at school. And so last year, actually, I decided to honor her by making popcorn balls for everybody at my job for, I think it was Halloween, and I wanted to do something nice. And so I just made mini size popcorn balls because I work at a hospital, so it was a lot of people. But I made that, and I made it the way that she would make it. And so it was really fulfilling and joy fulfilling for me to be able to remember her in that way, and to have that opportunity to say that, hey, mom, you're still a part of me and I haven't forgotten you. And so here's the part I also want to drive home, is that blooming doesn't mean forgetting. If I haven't mentioned that before, you are allowed to thrive. You are allowed to laugh. You are allowed to pursue new dreams, right? To build new dreams, build new memories, and live a full life, even as you carry the memories of someone you've lost. Joy is not a betrayal. It is a continuation of love. And I think some people, I have encountered some people who feel guilty for moving on and I don't want to say moving on, because really they think they're moving on, but really what they're doing is moving forward with the love, moving forward with the memories, moving forward with the sorrow, right? You're not moving on from it, but you're moving forward with it. And they feel, because they're thinking that I'm moving on without them, they feel guilty for moving into a life where they feel happy and they are experiencing joy. But when you come to the understanding that you're not moving on, but you're moving forward with every experience that you've ever had with this person, then you realize that I'm not guilty. This is not guilty. This is not shame, that I've found joy and some laughter and some peace and some happiness because they're not here. But it is just an extension of who they are to you, an extension of the love that you do have for them as you continue to move forward in your life and live life. So that's part of the reason this podcast is called Breathe, so that you can be reminded that because you're still able to breathe, there's still a life in you that gives you the opportunity to move forward through, to process through what you're experiencing, feeling both the joy and the sorrow of your life. And I want to, for every woman that is listening, who may be wondering if she's moved on too quickly or hasn't held fast enough, to really just release that pressure off of you, because healing is not a finish line, and honoring your loved one is not measured by just tears alone, right? Sometimes the greatest tribute that you can offer is to keep living with intention, to live with purpose, and a soft heart, to be gentle with yourself. Our loved ones, they live on in our words, in our strength, in the way we show up for life every single day. We are expressing our love and honoring them in every space that we show up. As we bring this episode to a close, I want to thank you for taking this sacred pause with me. Whether you are in the thick of your grief or just beginning to feel life bloom again, I do hope you were reminded that your story matters and that so does your healing. Grief doesn't mean your life is over. It means your heart is learning how to carry love in a new way. And you are allowed to cry. You are allowed to laugh. You are allowed to bloom at your own pace. This is Women's History Month, and what better time for us to honor not only the legacies of the women who came before us, but also the strength of the woman you are becoming right now, in this moment, through it all. So I encourage you this week to do one thing that honors your grief and one thing that nourishes your growth. Light a candle, take a walk, write a letter, speak their name, breathe deep, right? And keep moving forward. If this episode spoke to you, I'd love you to share it with a sister, a friend, or anyone who might be silently carrying something heavy. Let's keep creating space where women can grieve fully and live freely. Until next time, I'm Dr. Tammy Isaac, reminding you to give yourself permission to breathe and to keep blooming, even here.
Thank you so much for joining me today on the Permission to Breathe podcast. I hope today created space for you to breathe and find peace on your journey. I invite you to join me again next Monday for another episode as we continue to navigate this path together. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and to share the podcast. Until next time, take care and keep breathing unapologetically.